Then I drove back home with the postcard still pinned to the fridge and a silence in my chest so loud it hurt to swallow. That night, Melanie called to say she was staying one more day. I told her to take her time, because sometimes the worst thing you can do isn't reacting too soon. It's realizing you've already waited too long. And me? I was done waiting. By the time she pulled into the driveway Sunday night, I'd already made peace with a few things. First, the truth doesn't always arrive with sirens. Sometimes it shows up in the form of a bumper sticker you once laughed at now parked outside another man's rental. Second, if you let silence sit too long between two people, it grows teeth. Third, I wasn't angry. I was awake. That's more dangerous if you ask me. Melanie walked in like nothing happened, set her bag by the coat rack, took off her shoes like this was just another weekend, another Sunday, another lie served lukewarm. I was at the kitchen table. No lights. Just the dim hum from the fridge and my half-drunk beer sweating onto a paper coaster from Tony's Bar and Bait, the one with the slogan, "Where even your regrets can catch something." She didn't look surprised to see me. That stung worse than it should have. "Hey," she said, soft as a lullaby. "Didn't expect you to be up." "I'm just sitting," I replied, "thinking about postcards." That stopped her mid-step. She stood there for a full beat, then another. Then came the sigh. Long, tired, honest. "You went to Freyport." I nodded, didn't say a word. She sat down across from me, folded her hands. No tears, no excuses. Just a woman who'd stopped pretending the curtain hadn't already fallen. "We're always the anchor," she said. "Solid, reliable, safe, and I needed that for a long time." I tilted my head. "But now you want the wind." "I always wanted the wind," she said. "I just got too tired to chase it. Until I didn't." I should have felt humiliated. I didn't. I felt like a man who finally read the last page of a book he pretended to enjoy. "So what now?" I asked. She didn't blink. "I don't want to destroy what we had. But I can't keep pretending it's still alive. Maybe we take a pause. Give it space. A pause. Like this was some Netflix series she wanted to come back to later." "Right," I said, getting up. "Just hit the button and pick up where we left off." She looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something real flicker behind her eyes. Not love, not guilt. Just the sharp clarity that sometimes shows up when people finally admit what they've been burying for years. I slept in the truck that night, not because she kicked me out. I just didn't want to breathe the same air as someone who called betrayal a pause. By sunrise, I had a plan. Not revenge, not drama. I'm too old for that crap. What I wanted was distance. Clean, cold, undeniable distance. The kind that doesn't ask questions and doesn't owe answers. First thing I did was close the joint account. Left her enough to keep the lights on and buy her organic oatmeal or whatever she was into these days. The rest moved into my name. Then I sold the Silverado. That one hurt. I loved that truck. Restored it myself piece by piece. But it had too much of us in it. So I traded it in for cash and a one-way detachment. Next came the storage unit. I dragged out my uncle's old fishing boat, a 26-foot thresher with faded red paint and a cabin that smelled like salt, beer, and the ghosts of better decisions. I named her Alternative 1.0 because nothing says fresh start like floating, away from the wreckage in a boat older than your marriage. I called Luis after that, Luis Gutierrez, ex-roadie, semi-legal mechanic, former expert in making things disappear. We go way back. He once rebuilt my carburetor using parts from a pinball machine and a microwave. "Need a favor," I told him. "You want a body buried or a car relocated?" he asked, only half joking. "Neither," I said. "I want a file dropped and a knee tapped." Long pause. Then, "You're gonna have to be more specific, hermano." I told him about Troy, gave him the address, passed over a manila envelope with some things I'd found. Stuff I'm not proud to have dug up, but necessary. Not illegal. Just informative. Turns out military men don't always leave clean trails, especially the ones who re-enter civilian life thinking it still owes them medals. You sure about this? Luis asked, squinting at a photo. No violence, I said. Just a reminder that not everything he touches turns to gold. He nodded. Consider it a light slap from karma's open hand. The documents about the Civic, the joint investments, the land title for a patch of woods upstate. All of it, I transferred or froze, not to hurt her, to untangle, to make sure if she wanted the wind, she could fly without pulling me with her. They don't tell you this in wedding vows, but somewhere between raising kids and changing oil, you stop being a person and start being the guy who's always home on Saturdays. I didn't mind it. Hell, I kind of liked being predictable. Woke up at 5:30, hauled freight across 3 counties, fried bacon exactly 3 times a week. 4, if I was feeling generous. You'd be surprised how much dignity there is in routine, especially when the world's turning itself inside. Out every 10 minutes, Melanie, though. My wife of 24 years. She used to call routine the slow death of wild hearts. That was back when she still had fire in her eyes and purple streaks in her hair. Lately, the only color left was the beige cardigan she wore like a warning label. Now, don't get me wrong. She's not a bad person. Just faded. Like the labels on the VHS tapes we still haven't thrown away. Maybe I faded too, maybe we both did. But after both kids moved out, Wyatt to Chicago for finance and Audrey to Virginia for whatever you call consulting, I figured we'd get back to being us again. Big mistake. She started making weekend trips to visit her mother upstate. That part didn't feel weird. Her mom's a quiet woman with a love for knitting and strong opinions about the government. What did feel weird was how Melanie stopped calling from there, and how her texts read like they were written by ChatGPT in low-power mode. Dry, robotic, one-word replies. No heart. Still, I didn't panic. Maybe she was tired. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe men shouldn't Google emotional distance in long-term marriages at 2 in the morning. But then came the postcard. I was flipping through the mail like usual. Mostly junk, couple of bills, 1 letter for the previous tenant that, I swear, keeps showing up just to remind me I'll never be done with other people's problems. And there it was. A postcard, glossy, scenic, picture of a lake surrounded by hills, the kind of place they film antidepressant commercials. It said, Freyport, Hidden Valley Retreat. Breathe easy, stay long. No return address, no message. Just our home address and a cheerful printed font that felt like it was smirking at me. Freyport. She told me she was in Syracuse that weekend, her mom's place. Except Syracuse doesn't have a hidden valley, and I'm pretty sure they don't sell tranquility there either. I sat there holding that stupid card like it was radioactive. Then I put it on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a crab holding a beer can. Because sometimes irony is the only armor you've got. I didn't say anything when she came back. Instead, I did something smarter. I waited. A week later, she was packing again. Same duffel bag. Same excuse. Mom's feeling a little down. I'll be back Sunday. I nodded, told her to drive safe, kissed her on the cheek, and went back to replacing a taillight on my nephew's Chevy like I hadn't just swallowed a concrete block whole. Saturday afternoon, I drove to her mom's. Mrs. Simmons opened the door in house slippers and a look that said, "Why is a grown man on my porch holding a pecan pie?" We chatted for a bit. I gave her the pie. Asked about Melanie. "Oh," she said, eyes squinting like I'd spoken in Morse code. "I haven't seen her since February." It was April. Now I'm not the kind of man who yells. I'm the kind who quietly rewires his brain mid-conversation. I nodded, thanked her for the pie-forgotten kindness, and walked back to my truck, feeling like gravity had just doubled. By nightfall, I was in Freyport. It's not much of a town. Couple of overpriced shops, a diner called Earl's Second Chance, and a yoga studio that smelled like kombucha and judgment. I wasn't sure what I expected, but what I found was worse than anything I imagined. There it was. A rental unit in a beige stucco complex called The Cove, apartment 3C. Her car, the blue Civic with the bumper sticker that said "Librarians do it quietly," parked right outside. The porch light was on. I stood across the street for a while behind the wheel of my truck, watching shadows move behind the curtains. Then a man stepped out for a smoke. Tall, athletic, strong jawline that probably made TSA agents uncomfortable. He didn't see me. I knew who he was anyway. Troy Beckett. The name rang a bell, and not the good kind. He was the one from the stories Melanie told back in the early years. Her free-spirited high school boyfriend who joined the Air Force and disappeared into the clouds. The guy who once took her to a barn dance and taught her how to slow dance to Johnny Cash. Did she? Seen photos once. He had that smug, photo-filtered, all-American look that made you want to punch something nostalgic. I didn't approach. I didn't knock. I didn't yell or cry or demand explanations. I took a photo. Just one. From the side mirror, her car, his door, one shadow overlapping another. It took 72 hours. After that, I was a man with no truck, no house, no wife, and a boat full of canned chili and vintage cassette tapes labeled Road Vibes Vola 1. I left a note on the counter. It said, "You wanted the wind." I'm off to learn how to sail. No signature. I didn't want to give her that part of me anymore. The marina was quiet when I pulled out. Just me, Alternative 1.0, and a seagull that looked like it was judging my life choices. I throttled slow, past the docks, past the families loading up for fishing trips, past the jet ski punks blaring bad pop music. Then I turned south. Didn't have a destination, just a direction. And that was enough. You learn a few things fast when you take off on a boat that hasn't seen open water since Bush was president. First, duct tape can hold more pressure than most marriages. Second, seagulls have no respect for personal space. And third, the ocean doesn't give a damn about your emotional baggage. Alternative 1.0 wasn't a yacht. She was closer to a floating shed with a stubborn engine and just enough charm to make you forgive her flaws. She creaked in all the wrong places. The radio only picked up gospel or static, and the fridge gave up on day 3. But she floated and she was mine. That counted for something. I didn't have a plan. Just a loose idea: head south along the coast, avoid marinas with gift shops, and stop wherever the beer was cold and the questions were optional. By the 5th day, I'd settled into a rhythm: wake up with the sun, eat something that came from a can, fish for exactly 10 minutes, just enough to pretend I tried, then steer her south. Sleep came easy. Loneliness came quieter than I expected. And then came her. I spotted the yacht just after sunset. Big thing. White, polished, lit up like a floating wedding cake. Anchored weirdly close to shore, but no signs of life. No movement, no voices, no music. Just light. Now I don't usually approach strangers on boats. That's how horror stories start. But something felt off. And curiosity, as it turns out, doesn't retire at 48. I circled around slowly. Didn't call out. Didn't flash lights. Just eased Alternative 1.0 close enough to see what I was dealing with, and then she stepped out. Red dress, barefoot, hair up like she'd just left a photo shoot and decided to ruin her life on purpose. "Hey," she said, "calm as you please. You look more real than anyone I've seen in a while. Not help, not who are you. Just that." Like I was the answer to a riddle she wasn't sure she wanted solved. I raised an eyebrow. "You all right?" "I'm not sinking," she replied. But I'm not exactly floating either. That line stayed with me longer than it should have. Her name was Sadie Monroe. Late 20s, maybe early 30s. Hard to tell in the moonlight. She asked if she could come aboard, just for a night. Said she was tired of champagne and conversations about NFTs. That last part felt oddly specific. I didn't say yes. I just nodded once and cleared a space on the bench. She stepped onto my boat like she'd done it 1,000 times, then sat down and kicked her feet up like she owned the place. I offered her the last can of chili. She declined. Instead, she opened her purse and pulled out 2 protein bars and a flask that smelled like expensive bourbon and bad decisions. We didn't talk much that night. She curled up on the bench and hummed something under her breath. I pretended to read an old boating magazine from 2007 that featured a cover story titled The Motorboat Renaissance: Why Real Men Still Float. In the morning, I woke to the smell of real coffee, not the instant kind, real, dark, rich, with notes of forgiveness and second chances. Sadie stood at the tiny stove, wearing one of my flannel shirts like she'd found it in a movie montage. She handed me a cup without speaking, then stepped outside to make a call. I stayed inside, pretending not to listen. "He's fine," she whispered. "Normal, bit quiet, but decent. I think we're okay." She hung up before I could process, whether that was comforting or terrifying. 3 days later, a sleek black speedboat approached us near a cove that wasn't on any of my maps. At the helm stood a man in a pressed white shirt, aviators, and the kind of watch that usually comes with security clearance. "Ethan Carr?" he asked, stepping aboard like it was Tuesday. "Sometimes," I said. "Depends who's asking." He extended a hand. "Ronald Monroe, Sadie's father." Sadie gave him a look I wouldn't want directed at me. Ever. He turned to me. "My daughter has a talent for vanishing, but this time she didn't end up in Cabo with a DJ, so I consider that progress." "Glad I could be a downgrade," I said, sipping my coffee. He laughed. A dry, practiced sound. Then he got serious. "I'd like to make you an offer. No strings. Well, fewer strings than usual." I raised an eyebrow. "She needs space," he said, "and someone who isn't interested in selling her story. You seem appropriately disinterested." "Thanks," I replied. "I think." He handed me a small envelope, thick, heavy. "Just a token," he added, "for keeping the sharks away." I didn't open it. Not then. Maybe because I already knew what was inside, and maybe because I didn't want it to change anything. Sadie stayed quiet until he left. Then she said, "I was supposed to marry a guy named Blake, real estate, investment stuff. He threw a yacht party. There was an incident, the kind lawyers tell you not to talk about." I nodded. "Didn't push," she added. "I jumped overboard in a sequin dress and never looked back." I looked at her for a moment. "That why you picked my boat?" She shrugged. "You looked like a man who wouldn't ask for explanations." Fair enough. That night I marked a new route on the map, south-southwest, just past Fort Pierce. Away from the marinas, away from the stories. Just me, Sadie, and Alternative 1.0, the world's ugliest, most honest boat. And for the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about Melanie. I wasn't thinking about Troy, or the postcard, or what I left behind. I was thinking about where to find more coffee, because sometimes that's how new lives start. With caffeine and a passenger who ran from a wedding on a boat that shouldn't have been parked there in the first place. It's funny how fast new routines sneak up on you. One minute you're a man with a mortgage, matching bath towels, and a lawnmower named Hank. Next thing you know, you're anchoring in forgotten coves with a barefoot stowaway making French press coffee on a rusty burner while humming Stevie Nicks. Sadie and I didn't talk about the past much. That's what made it easy. She didn't ask why I left. I didn't ask who Blake was or what went down on that yacht. We just floated. Literally. Figuratively. Somewhere between escape and arrival. It wasn't romantic, not yet. Maybe not ever. But there was something between us that didn't need to be labeled. She smiled when I fixed the generator. I nodded when she cooked pasta using only one pot and 3 curse words. We were 2 people surviving politely. Meanwhile, the world we'd left behind, that one started crumbling without us lifting a finger. First, I heard about Troy. Luis called me on a burner flip phone he'd duct-taped to a seagull statue at a fuel dock in Daytona. Classic Luis. "You know your boy Troy?" he said. "I know of him." Well, let's just say someone had a little chat with him outside a gym locker room. Polite, respectful, but his left knee may never be the same again. Luis? No. Violence? He assured me. Just gravity and a misplaced protein shake. Also, funny thing, IRS opened a file on him 2 days later. Might have had something to do with a folder I anonymously handed over. Real thick folder, paper cuts and everything. Coincidence, I said. The universe has taste, he replied. Then came the call about Melanie. She didn't reach out to cry or beg. No, that would have required self-awareness. Instead, I got an email from our old credit union saying she'd attempted to access a frozen account. Twice. The account that used to pay for her yoga retreats and half of Troy's sports supplements. I imagined the look on her face when the teller said, "Sorry, ma'am, it's not your money anymore." Apparently, Mr. Wind in his hair couldn't help. Between his IRS issues and a little gym incident that made deadlifts a thing of the past, he wasn't exactly in a position to play sugar daddy. Melanie had officially backed the wrong horse. As for me, I was somewhere near Fort Lauderdale, eating, fish tacos on deck, and listening to Sadie read excerpts from bad romance novels in an exaggerated Southern accent. She had a gift for making the ridiculous sound like gospel. Then came Ronald Monroe. Again. He didn't arrive in a speedboat this time. This time, he sent a helicopter, landed on a dock half a mile from where we were moored, stepped out in a linen suit like he was auditioning for a reboot of Magnum P.I. "You've done well," he said, handing me a sealed envelope. Inside, divorce. Papers. Finalized, signed, stamped, filed. With a transfer of assets that included a settlement from Melanie totaling $200,000. I blinked. She agreed to this? She didn't know she was agreeing, he replied. She just signed where her lawyer told her to. Remind me never to piss you off. He smiled faintly. You didn't. My daughter likes you. That's rare. Thanks, I think. Then he waved toward the dock. Moored there, big, sleek, absurdly beautiful, was a new yacht. Not massive, but clean, streamlined. Matte black trim with the name painted on the stern in a quiet, sharp font. Alternative 2.0, I looked at Sadie. She shrugged, sipping her coffee. Everyone deserves a second boat, she said. Or at least a cleaner one. I laughed harder than I had in months. The yacht was a gift. No strings. Just a thank you from a powerful man who didn't trust many people, but trusted me enough to let me float around the Atlantic with his most impulsive asset. I didn't know where I was headed next. But I knew what I wasn't doing. I wasn't waiting at home for a woman who thought I was a doormat with a driver's license. I wasn't chasing explanations or closure or whatever people post about on healing blogs. I wasn't going back. Instead, I climbed aboard Alternative 2.0, fired up the engines, and pointed her toward the horizon. Sadie threw her arms out on the bow like she was in a bad movie and shouted, "To the wind!" I shook my head and muttered, "You've got to be kidding." Me. But I smiled, because here's the truth. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the best detour you'll ever take. Sometimes the postcard is a warning sign, and sometimes, when the anchor finally lets go, you realize you never wanted to be still in the first place. Me? I'm just a guy with a strong coffee habit, a new boat, and one hell of a story no one would believe if I told it straight. But if you ever find yourself in the Keys and you spot a yacht called Alternative 2.0, stop by. We've got room for one more story.